Hello. So, funny story, it's been 3 weeks as opposed to the promised one since I've last updated, so bad on me. But in the 2 weeks, in that 2 or 3 weeks, I have done an extensive amount of research on essentially what I'm looking for in cameras and how I want this video to look. So what that entails is going to be certain things such as camera angles, and unfortunately I can't show you any of that because I'm still working on my laptop webcam still. But things such as camera angles, how high or low or far or out the camera is. So things like shot length, which would be how, and framing, how far away something is. So, so the thing that I'm filming in right now would be a close-up, as it shows only the, it shows very little background and it focuses on the face or a specific detail, and the object is magnified to show the importance. It usually shows trust or just a camera that is close to you because you're vlogging. Some other things that I have been researching and looking into are things like camera moves, such as panning the camera along, which is usually used to follow a moving object or a person, and it can show more than one thing in a frame. But the thing that they say amateurs, which would be me, have to be aware of is something called strobing, which is when you pan too fast and it makes the shot blurry, which makes everything disorienting. So something you can use to avoid this is something called scene motion blur, which is sharing information between scenes to help everything flow better. Something interesting that I found is that zooming and zooming in and out is actually used sparingly by professionals who just prefer to move the camera as opposed to doing the zoom. They think that it looks better, more efficient. It can also change spatial relationships, which brings me into the next thing that I've discovered, which is depth of field, which is like when one thing is close up and the other is farther behind, and it affects which one is more in focus. So there are a lot of aspects that go into that, and unfortunately with this camera, again, I can't show you any of it. But some of the main things is it's the front to back zone of a photo where the image is razor sharp, and there's a point of optimum focus. So shallow depth is when the focus point is very near, such as inches or feet, and deep is when the focus point is a couple of yards. Another important thing that I learned was visual effects, and as in how to make my video look as high quality as possible. These include things such as aperture, which is how much light is allowed through the lens into the image sensor, shutter speed, which is how long the shutter on your camera is open, allowing light into the image sensor, and frame rate. And the faster the frame rate, the smoother the film. Slow footage down. So you slow footage down by making a higher frame rate. So the lower the frame rate, the jerkier the image. A lot of security cameras will use a lower frame rate so they can see each section at a time. So a frame rate is measured in frames per second, and the standard frame rate is 24p or maybe around 30 frames per second or 60 interlaced frames per second. High-speed cameras can go to 60p or 120p. And there are some crazy directors who like to use weird things like 48p or 72p. 48p is what was used in The Hobbit, and which was a very unique film in that it creates a hyper-realistic image. Shutter speed is based off of frame rate, so the slower the shutter speed, the more light is allowed in, and shutter speed is measured as twice the frame rate. So if you were shooting at the standard of 24p, then the shutter speed is 1/48 of a second, which means that the shutter closes every 1/48 of a second. Um, 1/80th of a second shutter speed means less motion blur and clearer images. So if you were focusing on a fountain, for example, it would show extremely clear water, so you could almost see every single drop. Whereas if you use something lower, like 1/30 shutter speed, it would mean more motion blur and it would create a hazy, dreamlike sort of scene, and which creates sort of a disorienting image. Lighting and exposure are two other extremely important aspects of making a good film. So the different parts of lighting is your key light, which is about 45 degrees above the eyes, and it's used to really light up the subject. It is your strongest light, and it's the major light that you need. The next light is the fill light, which fills in any shadows on the other side of the face. It's diffused more than the key light, and which means that you can put like a cloth over the light or something so that it isn't quite as harsh, and it falls a bit more evenly. Then there is the hair light, which is really if you were going to skip out on a light, this is the light that you would skip out on. It separates the subject from the background, and it goes behind the subject, slightly above the head, and tilted a bit down. The problem, I was planning on using room lights, but I found out that room lights create harsh shadows from above. So if you're using room lights, it creates a look that you don't actually want. So what you should do is actually turn off the lights in the room and then get lights at a more eye level. One of the most important things that I learned off of lighting is cheap alternatives to using the industry standard lighting that costs hundreds of dollars. So for things such as key lights, you can use anything just like a lamp with like a clamp on it, or um, any just something that you can get from a hardware store for $10. You can also use the Chinese lantern balls with the paper around them for fill lights because they're diffused already. And if possible, you can also use a work lamp like they have on some construction sites. The thing you need to be careful about with those is that they get very hot. So, and they also create very bright, harsh light. So what you might want to do is if you get a work lamp, which I don't see myself doing, is you would shine it towards a wall, and the light would bounce off of the wall and back and create and work as a fill light. So to close everything off, I have mentioned that I would like to have a better camera soon, and based off of the research that I have done recently, I have been able to work on finding what camera I want and what features I wanted to have so this looks as good as possible. I have spoken with the counselors to see about renting a camera because they are expensive and I'm not sure if I want to spend all of the money for a 7-month project. It might be nice, but I'm not sure if it's worth the investment. I have also spoken about getting better editing software, and I have sort of promised I would have had everything by now, but it isn't quite working out that way. So what I'm going to do is I've got the editing software that I need for the computer, and I'm going to contact my friend, and by the end of the week, I will have the software that I need, and it will be on the computer. So the videos will flow a bit smoother, and everything will look a bit nicer, or at least that is my hope. And because I don't, because just between you and me, Windows Live Movie Maker, it's not a lot of fun. It's not fun. I don't like it. So hopefully I will get better software this week, at least for editing, that will make my life easier. And I will continue research and find out which camera I want. I'm not going to order something online. I'll probably just go to Target and figure out what they have easily available. Or hopefully I can rent something from the school, and that would be nice. So now that I've done all of my basic fact research on filmmaking and what I want everything to look like, I can now start doing research on what I want the concept of the video to be, and I can focus on statistic things like what bullying is in schools, and I can start focusing on what I want to convey, so that hopefully by the end of this month I'll be ready to write the first draft of my screenplay, so that I can have the script completely done by mid-November. So hopefully I will see you next week. Actually, not hopefully. I will see you next week. It will happen. I will be more on top of things now that I finally got things going. And I'll get everything together. I will get everything done in a fashionable amount of time. But at this point in time, I'm hungry. So I will see you later.